Welcome to LBNN News, the low budget news network. Today is May 4th, 1970s, and today we're going to be reviewing the impact of the anti-war movement. I'm your host, Pierre.
And I'm your co-host, Rob. Although initially supporting the war, many members of the U.S. public were concerned that the war would drag on forever, as shown by the Tet Offensive. The protesters used various forms of speech to get their message across, such as burning draft cards, teach-ins, and storming college campuses. Perhaps the most notable protest happened at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Young protesters had formed outside the convention as they blamed the Democrats for starting the war. The protest and following riot divided the Democrats and set up a Republican victory in 1968.
Richard Nixon was elected President of the United States that year, promising to put an end to the Vietnam War. In November of 1969, the My Lai massacre by American troops in a Vietnamese village was exposed, leading to increased public opinion to the United States' involvement in the war. The nature of the draft also changed in December of 1969 with the first draft lottery since World War II, thus affecting many college students and teachers. In addition, the war had appeared to be winding down in 1969, so Nixon's new invasion of Cambodia angered those who believed it only continued the conflict.
Multiple groups of students gathered at Kent State on May 4th to express their anger over these events. They were located on campus by Taylor Hall and Campus Commons. Some of the students on the Taylor Hall began to move slowly toward the soldiers as they passed over the top of the hill and headed back into the Commons.
During their climb back to Blanket Hill, several guardsmen stopped and half-turned to keep their eyes on the students in the Prentice Hall parking lot. At 12:24 p.m., a sergeant named Myron Pryor turned and began firing at the crowd of students with his .45 pistol. A number of guardsmen nearest the students also turned and fired their rifles at the students. In all, at least 29 of the 77 guardsmen claimed to have fired their weapons using an estimated of 67 rounds of ammunition. However, the shooting was determined to have only lasted 13 seconds. In the end, 4 students died and 13 were injured. 11 days later, 2 students were killed and 11 were injured at the Jackson State shooting.
Now we take it to our reporters who are currently on campus at Kent State.
My name's Gianna Lessick and I'm reporting live from Kent State University. It all started when Nixon reinstated the draft in December of 1969. The war had appeared to be winding down in 1969, so the new invasion of Cambodia angered those who believed it only exacerbated the conflict. Across the U.S., campuses erupted in protests in what Time called a nationwide student strike, setting the stage for the events of early May protests. This is the 4th day of protest here at Kent State. On May 1st, a 500-student demonstration took place on the common grounds. There was a lot of anger manifesting. It was said that a group of history students buried a copy of the Constitution to symbolize that Nixon had killed it. The second day consisted of numerous reports from business owners and city officials receiving threats, even scarier rumors of students plotting to poison the water supply with LSD. Governor Rhodes sent the Nation Guard here for protection from future incidents. Ending the second day, the protesters set fire to the ROTC building. As the firemen were extinguishing the flames, they were struck by rocks and other objects thrown by protesters. On the third day, a press conference took place at the Kent State Firehouse. Governor Rhodes called the student protesters un-American, referring to them as revolutionaries set on destroying higher education in Ohio. Around 8 p.m., another rally was held on campus commons. By 8:45, the guardsmen used tear gas to disperse the crowd. This leads us into today with protesters gathering with numbers of about 2,000 people. The protest began with ringing the campus's iron victory bell to mark the start of the rally. This is where the protest began on the Kent State University campus. And this is where the students began the protest by ringing the campus bell. As you see there, we have a fellow protester protesting the war in Cambodia. And as you see here, this is where all 2,000 people were gathered. The National Guard was sent to disperse the crowds that were forming. The guards first attempted to drive them off campus, and then they tried to use tear gas. Both of these options weren't working, so they resorted to using guns on the students. The students retreated up Blanket Hill. This is where the students were protesting, and then when the National Guard started shooting at them, they retreated up this hill over here. And this is where the 4 students got shot. The students retreated up Blanket Hill. The guardsmen followed and pursued the protesters. Out of 77 guardsmen, 29 of them shot at protesters using an estimate of 67 rounds. The shooting lasted 13 seconds, but the people involved said it felt like minutes. The question of why the shots started is still debated. Many of the guards said that they were scared of their lives and claimed a sniper had fired on them. This shot killed 4 students.